Couldn't believe what I'd seen this morning. One of my customers, Paul, sent me a link to Gadget John, who's a brilliant reviewer and he's doing a van build at the minute. He sent me a link to his video. He's got an Ecoflow, and some of the wiring that had been sent had been joined in a really bad way, and even worse, it had actually been covered up. So what he uncovered as he was doing something else on his van, and he found a burn mark on his floor, and when he investigated it, I think it was the negative wire, it looked like a 16mm cable, had been joined together and then wrapped with electrical tape and then heat shrinked, almost to hide it, because you would never want to do that in any other way really. Like, you shouldn't be joining a piece of wire like that. How that's passed quality checks is one thing, but you could see John physically getting upset, and I've seen what can happen when things are done badly. There's a couple who have a family camper van business and had also suffered a van that had totally burnt out. So the dangers in a van, especially when you're doing it yourself, is you've got to treat it as seriously as the things that you would be doing in your own home. And even though vans don't have the same sort of compliance and things like that, you really need to be doing everything that you can in the safest way possible. Things like connections on your electric should be sound. You want to be using the best components that you can, whether that's wire, fuse connections. You've really got to be careful. I'd spotted it myself. I'd used a cheap Chinese relay in my unit when I'd fitted it in my van, and it kept on failing. And when I took it apart, the components in there were like semi-burnt out, and then I went online and found that it's quite a common thing with these particular type of switches. So where am I going with this? I think first it was just my reaction to how lucky John and Mandy have been. If that would have happened at night or while they were driving the vehicle, they could have been away on holiday driving the van. A fire could have started, they've had to get out of the van, and they might have lost the van depending on how fast they'd have got on top of the fire. So it's really dangerous. And I think anything when you're dealing with fuel, whether that's electricity, gas, anything like that, when you're dealing with a fuel source, especially at high amps, you need to be mindful of doing everything you possibly can to reduce your risk. And how Ecoflow have sent that out, like with that joining, just the mind boggles. I just cannot get my head around that. So yeah, really lucky for them to have noticed. Obviously his intuition is seeing that burn mark. He's been quite fortunate to spot it during the build, and he's been able to rectify it. I've reached out to him to see if I could help him out with a Clayton unit and just do it at cost, just to give him something that's more reliable. This is not the first story that's been coming out about the sort of cheaper Chinese made units. Like, most components are made in China, but actually when you're putting these all-in-one units together, you really want someone who knows what they're doing. So yeah, I think it's a big kind of wake-up call. And heard a lot of scare stories about the cheap Chinese diesel heaters, and I've got nothing against people being on a budget and putting certain key things in the van. I've made similar decisions around things that I've been putting in my van. We use auto-term in our smaller transporters, in our smaller vans, which I feel is tried and tested, and they've had very little problems. But something like a Webasto that's really expensive, I wouldn't go that far, because you're then going past safety levels into the realm of just, I don't know, paying for the brand. And it's interesting, you've got people like sort of PF Jones. I spoke to the MD Gary recently, and I know they do a Chinese diesel heater, but they actually do one that's warranted by them. So they've picked and sourced one that works really well and has good safety standards. So that could be a way of getting, for example, a cheaper diesel heater in your vehicle. It just sent chills down me really. Anyone who's out there building their own van, just be mindful of what you're doing, the quality of the wires, the connections. If you're ever unsure about anything, get a bit of advice off someone. I'm not an electrician, but we're all able to do our research and check on things. I've got a mate who's an electrician, so I check in with him and make sure things are done a certain way. And ultimately, it's just about trying to reduce your risk, so that when you're in your vehicle and when you're in your van and you're on holiday, you can enjoy it without having any problems, but also the peace of mind that there's nothing in your van that's a little bit iffy. I don't know what Ecoflow are going to do in terms of apologising or coming out and saying anything about it, but as I say, it's not the first time some bad information's come out I believe in one country, I know it had been pulled because of safety issues. So yeah, shout out to John and Mandy. I feel like they've massively dodged a bullet there, and just glad he spotted it. I know you're going to the NEC. It'd be nice to actually meet up with you and have a catch up with you. Everyone take less risks and build safe. That's what I'd say.